Welcome to App Smashing. We're going to learn how to take all of your favorite tools, all your favorite tech tools, and keep them informative, making it super simple for you and your students to get all of the engaging content and practice that you'd like them to have, while also capturing all that great real-time data that Formative lets you capture. All right, a couple of things before we get started today. We are recording so that this can be posted on our Training Center website later for you all to be going back and taking a look at. So definitely feel free to ask questions in the chat. I have my colleague Alex with me here today, so he will be helping out in the chat, helping to answer any questions that you have. And I'll also be taking a peek at that as well to make sure we get everything answered for you before you walk away today. We are going to go for about 30 minutes today, but a chunk of that will be work time for you. So you'll be able to actually practice embedding with Formative before you leave, and you have your own personal coach here to help you with any questions that you have as that process moves forward. All right, we're going to cover three big things today. The first thing is the embedding feature, where to find it, how to use it. And then we're going to talk about the types of websites and apps, and y'all were mentioning some great ones in the chat previously. And it looks like, from what I just quickly scanned on there, most of those can be embedded in Formative, which is awesome. And then the last part of our time together is going to be, like I said, some work time for you, some practice time. So let's go ahead and dive on in. I'm actually going to pull up the Formative website here as we start talking through embedding. So there's a couple of different places within a Formative that you can find the embedding tool. One of which may get overlooked depending on how frequently you use this instructional block, is actually right here in this instructions block at the top of your Formative. This embed option here gives you a great opportunity to add things like a calculator that a student may need to use for the entire Formative, maybe a website that's related to the entire Formative for students, a dictionary, things along that line. So definitely think about how embedding a content or a resource in this instruction block up at the top here can be beneficial for your students as they use it throughout the entire Formative. Okay. Other places you can find the embed tool. The one that's really clear and in your face here is in the content space. And when you use this, it creates a content block, we call it, where the content is on the left-hand side and the questions are on the right-hand side. This is really great if you're trying to embed things like Google Slides or a website or practice for students, where they're going to interact with it and then answer some questions over here related to what they're doing on the embedded app or website. The other place, or the last place, where you're going to be able to find the embed tool is within the question itself. This is a really great option for when you are adding things like a calculator for a specific question or a dictionary for a specific question. It doesn't prevent the student from using it on any other question, but it can help kind of cue the student into, we need to make sure that we're using this accommodation or this tool for this question. Okay. So definitely keep an eye out in this space here to add your embedded options throughout your questions. So let's see what this looks like. I'm going to embed a couple of examples here just to show you. But this is one of my favorite websites. I use it all the time whenever I'm trying to embed things. iframegenerator.com. I know it's blocked by some schools, but there's definitely free iframe generators out there that may or may not be blocked by your school's filters. So definitely take a look through and see if you can find the one that works within the parameters of your filters. But the way this functions is you just have to grab the URL. So this is great for any kind of websites like, oh, I want to use this, but I can't find an embed code on it. That's okay. That's what this is for. So in this case, I'm going to pull up a PhET simulation. I know somebody dropped that in the chat earlier. So I have an acids and base PhET simulation I'm going to pull up here real quick. just show you what this looks like. So here's my simulation. There wasn't an embed code on it, so I'm just going to grab the URL. And when I grab the URL, I come back over here to my iframe generator, drop the URL in here, hit generate, and then I can preview it just to make sure that I know what it's going to look like. I can see what the embedded tool will look like in Formative. I can then copy it, bring it back to the Formative, and drop that embed code in the Formative. And then you'll see this simulation will show here for students. Okay. Which is great because this helps really showcase this science content, but there's no questions attached to it. So as a teacher, while I really want my students to be participating with something like this, I also want to just double check that they actually understood the material. And this is where all of your questions on the right-hand side of your embedded content really help to encourage students to participate with the learning and participate actively with these tools. Okay. Let's show one more example of a content embedded option before I jump into the question option. And I like to show this one because I know as a teacher, I always have a ton of like Google Drive of slides, of things like that, that are used to teach a bunch of different things, or they may be used as just content for students. Maybe it's a vocabulary. I know we used to have like a digital notebook for math for students that had vocabulary and examples in it. So that may be something that I could drop into Formative to have my students access later or while they're working on questions. So in this case, I'm just going to go into Google Drive, grab the share link, and paste that in the embed code. And what that does is it then presents the Google Slides here as a clickable slideshow for students to work through. So if you had content here that you wanted students to work in and be able to answer questions on, this is a great way to showcase both. Okay. This also works for Google Docs as well and Sheets. The only one it doesn't function for is Jamboard. So that seems to be the only Google thing that we can't get to come into Formative, but everything else can be embedded within Formative. Last option here under actually embedding a tool into Formative. So in this case, I'm going to be in a question, and any place you see this little multimedia plus sign here, you should be able to see this embed option, and you'll see the embed code shows up like this. In this case, I want to embed actually a calculator for my students. So I'm going to grab the Desmos calculator. Let's go with this one. Just a quick for function. I can copy the URL again, come to iframe, drop it in, copy it, and bring it back to Formative. Now, I notice here that it's a little cut off. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go back to my iframe generator, and I'm going to play with the height and width until it gets where I want it to be. So I'm going to bump this up. I'm going to generate it again, and I'm going to preview. It looks like I can see the whole thing this time. So I'm going to copy it. We're going to see here if it changes everything there. Now, oh, it looks like I made it a little too big. So sometimes you may need to play around with this a little bit to get it to fit in a way that's going to be seen really clearly by students. So yeah, so there we go. 400 by 400 took care of that. And when I add the embed, the calculator is perfectly seen right here for my students. And you can type your question around that. And obviously I would include more of a show your work type of a situation here, but it gives you the idea of what these embedded tools look like for students. So speaking of, I'm going to drive on over here to the preview button, which replaced our little eyeball of a preview for you. And you'll see here's the simulation that's clickable for my students. Okay, here. And I can answer the questions as well. Here's my Google Slides. Clickable. I can go into full screen if I want to. I can exit full screen here too. So students can interact with the content and make it bigger for them. Here's our calculator. So you've got all of your options here as well. Okay. The answer is showing over here. It even says it there. All right. Questions on how to take different websites that we talked about here and embed them into different parts of the formative. Any questions on that front? So now we get into the fun stuff. Now that I've shown you how to do it, now it's going to be your turn to actually do it yourself. And what I did here was I just created a couple of options. So these are ones that we see teachers use all the time with the embed tools. So practice, if you have a website that just comes up with a lot of practice problems for them, but doesn't track how well they did, that's a great thing to try to embed in formative, because after they've gotten some practice, then they can answer some questions in formative that you can track to standards. So a great way to kind of balance a couple of those like quick, easy practice things and activities with formative data points for you as a teacher. It's also a great place to put in a game that maybe doesn't track how they do it all. It's a little bit more exciting for them. Practice is a great opportunity to embed a external website with formative. Accommodations, like we talked about, calculators and dictionaries and manipulatives. Those are really great things to embed within a question itself or side by side with a set of questions. You know that the student has to use the accommodation for multiple questions or multiple question types. Simulations, labs without the lab materials, without having to set up for every single student materials that you may or may not have within the classroom. Simulations are a great way to bring those tactile hands-on learning into students' hands through a digital means, and then also being able to capture their learning through the questions within the formative. And content, great places to just kind of hold your content for slides and videos, and one places for students. If you embed a YouTube video and you don't want to add questions to it, that using the embed tool is a way to add the video without having to add any questions to it. I've also seen teachers use this embed tool to embed specific websites, especially around younger students when they're trying to coach and structure research processes. Adding those websites as an embedded tool within formative allows the students to see the types of websites they need to see, but also capture their learning through a snapshot of their questions and answers that they're putting into formative. So I'm going to stop talking because I've talked for far too long already and let you all get to work. So I am going to be quiet unless there are specific questions. Please feel free to use this time as a time to actually practice it. If there's one that you're not sure, you want to embed it, but you're not really sure, give it a try now while we're on this webinar together. Ask your questions if you're running into issues. Okay. However, I totally understand that time is precious, so I'm going to come back to this question or back to this page in just a second. If you have to run and now you don't have time to stay with us and work, that's okay. Be sure to check out these 3 different areas if you're looking for more help and guidance. There is an article on the Help Center for embedding different tools. Definitely check something here if you're looking for help with embedding. Training Center, this webinar will be posted there next week. So definitely come back and take a look at it if you're not quite sure how to go about embedding different things. This formative support button within your account is a great place if you're running into something that is not quite working the way you know it should. Contact our formative support button or formative support team through this button, and you will be able to be connected with somebody. Okay, awesome. All right, I do know that some folks are going to be running, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the survey link in the chat for you, and then I'm going to go back and we can sit and work together. This survey link is how you will get your certificate for participating in this webinar. Fill out the survey link and you will get a certificate at the beginning of April. So definitely feel free to fill that out. We really appreciate your feedback. And then, all right, let's jump back to our other page here. We had our examples of embedding. All right, I see a question when you assign something informative. Is there a teacher pace option? Yes, there is, Michelle, 100%. When you come over here to your assigned settings, after you pick a class, it's right here underneath. It's just a toggle on. Yeah, so it's really interesting. If you all haven't seen what this looks like yet, I'm just going to preview it for you really quickly. Oh, I need to do this first. Let me do. I can assign it and then we can go from. Let's see. Go back and assign it to guest students, and then y'all can jump in if you want. Yay, that's awesome. Oh, Michelle, I'm so excited to hear that. I'm glad we were able to get you a solution. So yeah, so when I toggle this on to teacher pace mode and I hit assign, this gets ready to start here. And then you'll see just one, even though there were 3 different embedded options in this formative, only one of them is showing here. So only one of them would be showing for my students. And my students would be able to see here and work with this on their own without impacting anyone else's. So they get their own individual version to be able to work with and interact with. And then the teachers can see here on the View Responses tab within their formative, they can track their student progress through the formative and dive in to see individual students' work. So it really gives them that bird's eye view of everything that their students are doing in that live lesson. Now when I'm ready to move on, I just hit next. Here's my slides that I can click through or make bigger if I want to. And then I can move on to my final question. And again, here's my calculator, here's my question, and students can interact this way with the calculator. Good question. It's also helpful to see what it looks like from the student end on this side too. And then if you ever want to switch it back and forth between teacher pace and student pace, you can always switch it to student pace here if you're ready for students to work on their own. Switch back. Oh, Michelle, if you actually upload, if you want to upload each slide as its own slide, like its own section within teacher pace mode, you're going to want to go to this enhanced PDF doc or Google image. And what this does is it uploads only one slide to each content block. So the teacher would advance through the slideshow at their own pace. So that should work for you. Yeah, Michelle, this upload your own content is awesome. So like here, I'll pick right from Google Drive, like I just did here. If it'll load. Notifications. Yeah, no problem. There we go. And so each of these will populate as its own content block here. I'll give it a second to load. And then you can add questions for each slide here, or if you want to add more content to the slide in addition to what's on the Google slide or presentation or PowerPoint slide, you can add more content on the side here as well. So you have all of your question types and the content options to add on this right side. These do upload as images, so it's just something to kind of keep in mind that if there's any interactive pieces, it will show as a whole image. So animations and things will not show, but You can always, like I said, if the animations are super important and you want students to see the animations, just embed the whole slide deck. YouTube videos, those are easy. I like doing YouTube videos because they have an embed code right on the YouTube video when you go to share it. So it's super simple to grab the embed code and just throw it into the formative space. So that's awesome. That's always one of my favorite ones. All right, we are down to the last couple minutes here. We've got about 6 minutes left of our time together. So I will go ahead and post again the survey link in the chat for everybody. Please feel free to fill this out if you'd like a certificate from us certifying you spent a half hour with us working on embedding within the platform. And that will come out sometime at the beginning of April. So definitely keep an eye on your email in the first couple weeks of April. We send the certificates out monthly. And if there's no more questions, then I hope you all have a great rest of your day from wherever you are. And we appreciate you spending some time with us today. And have a great rest of your day.